Our committee meets today to receive testimony on the department's military construction, energy installations, environmental and base closure programs in the review of the Defense Authorization request of fiscal 2026. I would like to welcome Assistant Secretary Marks to his first hearing since his recent confirmation. So, Mr. Secretary, welcome, and congratulate you and look forward to working closely with you in this very important role for our military and the Pentagon. I also thank the other esteemed witnesses for being here today and for their continued service to our country. Each of you play an important role in ensuring our armed forces are ready at a moment's notice to defend our country. But right now we are facing problems and challenges that are detrimental to that objective. While our personnel are the backbone of our military, the installations are what bring them together. Simply put, our decaying facilities are causing significant issues with regard to our warfighters, and the locations and resilience of our bases could serve as a detriment to our national security during wartime. With that in mind, I want to discuss our current basing posture in the Indo-Pacific in the context of dispersal, survivability, and logistics, including for bulk fuel and energy requirements. I believe we have over-concentrated our basing and force posture in the Indo-Pacific at places like Guam, and we should look for opportunities to both disperse and harden these facilities, make them more resilient, and position ourselves to better support operational and strategic maneuver in a contested environment in this critical AOR. I would like to hear from each of you on the implementation of the FY25 National Defense Authorization requirement to achieve 4% plant replacement value by 2030. This requirement came after a lack of priority from the services that led to crumbling infrastructure in many areas across the United States and the world. This has only driven up the cost and damaged service readiness. We must take immediate action to mitigate this damage for many of these facilities throughout the world. As Chairman Wicker said during the Air Force posture hearing, this is the law of the land. I would additionally like to discuss any updates each of you have in improving and maintaining unaccompanied housing. The poor living conditions, which unfortunately include sewage overflow, mold, mildew, broken windows, decrease the quality of life and readiness for service members, mostly junior enlisted, and their families, which of course negatively impacts readiness across the services. We must ensure that our service members are not living in barracks that do not meet the standards set by the Department of Defense. Additionally, your thoughts on the Department's work in operational energy and how these systems can transform the modern warfighter are crucial to this committee's work on contested logistics. Finally, I would like to hear from each of the witnesses about your future priorities, since the Department did not release the future year's defense program budget through 2030. We are still waiting for that. The challenges we are facing today are the result of years of pushing these problems aside, kicking the can down the road. We must work together to modernize our infrastructure to give our country and our troops the best footing possible for any contingency that is thrown their way. Again, I want to thank the witnesses for attending today. I look forward to each of yours testimony, and with that, I want to thank my ranking member, Senator Hirono, and ask her for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan. I want to thank each of our witnesses for your years of service, and to the many hardworking civilians in your respective organizations, I thank them. This subcommittee remains focused on ensuring that the Department of Defense is equipped not only to meet today's operational requirements, but also to strengthen the long-term resilience, readiness, and well-being of our military installations. And I appreciate your engagement on each of these critical issues. I have been very focused on infrastructure, and I'm glad that the chair recognizes the importance of modernizing and repairing our infrastructure, which we have not done a very good job on. And I want to begin by expressing concern regarding this department's ability to deliver timely, efficient, and cost-effective infrastructure. Construction delays and cost overruns undermine readiness and public trust. I will ask each of you to identify specific areas where the military construction process can improve and what steps are being taken to enhance accountability and performance. I recognize this is a perennial, pretty much a perennial problem, but when I ask each of you to identify very specific ways that we can do better, I mean very specific, things that are doable, things that we can see the outcomes of the improvements. So please, think about that as I'm finishing my remarks. Another priority area is the quality of military housing, and apparently both the chair and I certainly have visited military housing and see the needs there. So both for families and unaccompanied service members, quality housing directly affects morale, retention, and overall readiness. Significant work still needs to be done. For example, the department's March report on its use of waivers highlighted 32 substandard facilities on Army installations. Yet we know the problem is broader. That is why I'm troubled to learn about the Army's plan to divert $1 billion of facility sustainment, restoration, and modernization funding to pay for operations at the southwest border. These funds were originally intended for the repair and maintenance of facilities like barracks. This is only occurring because the Secretary of Defense has chosen at every turn to waive reimbursement as an option in the many requests for assistance from the Department of Homeland Security. And it's a curious choice made by the Defense Secretary, especially since the DoD's FY24 agency financial report cited a deferred facility maintenance backlog of $267 billion. That is a significant part of the DoD's whole budget. We have to do better, people. We know that. So we need to understand how the department plans to ensure that soldiers have access to safe, well-maintained housing, considering this shift. This committee asked the Army 3 weeks ago for simple details on planned versus executed facility sustainment, restoration, and modernization projects in fiscal year 25, yet we've not received anything to date. So Dr. Waxman, I expect the Army to deliver answers as soon as possible to our requests. Pivoting to the Indo-Pacific, as each of you know, several of the military's more essential training areas across Hawaii are leased from the state and are set to expire in the coming years. The training areas are foundational to joint readiness in the region, and at the same time, they hold cultural and historical significance to the Native Hawaiian community. It is essential that any path forward respects that significance while ensuring our forces have access to the ranges and facilities that they need. The department must work in good faith with state officials and the community to ensure these leases are renegotiated in a way that is equitable to all parties. Regarding military construction in the Indo-Pacific, we have previously authorized the extensions of the H-2B visa programs to ensure sufficient labor for projects in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. Secretary Marks, as construction in the region accelerates, we need to understand the potential cost and readiness implication of these mission-critical visas, that they are extended. And I realize that the chair has asked a question as to the continuing spending that's going on in Guam, but if we intend to continue to do what we need to do in Guam, these visas are very necessary. Next, I'd like to touch on demand reduction and installation resilience. The Department's investment in operational energy programs not only reduces the logistics footprint for our warfighters, but also enhances their combat capabilities as well. It is critical these programs continue to garner the bipartisan support they've had for years now. Meanwhile, initiatives like the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program and Sentinel Landscape strengthen our installation readiness. These programs strengthen our these programs not only improve energy security and mission assurance, but also protect surrounding ecosystems and prevent encroachment on military bases. Finally, I want to address the growing risks posed by extreme weather and natural disasters to our installations. Secretary Marks, as you experience firsthand, these events have cost the department tens of billions of dollars and directly impact mission readiness. It is imperative that DoD approaches these risks proactively so the Joint Force is better postured to adapt to the risks to military installation resilience. So we can expect a lot more of these unpredictable weather events, and as I know, we should be better prepared to deal with the damage caused by these massive weather events. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I thank each of you for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. And now we're going to begin with 5-minute opening statements. If you have a longer written statement for the record, we'd be glad to submit that for the record. We'll begin with you, Secretary Marks.
Well, Chairman Sullivan and Ranking Member Hirono and distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As you mentioned, the newly confirmed Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy Installations and Environment, I really do appreciate this opportunity to discuss the President's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense's Energy Installation and Environment portfolio. The President and Secretary of Defense have laid out a clear objective for the Department: achieve peace through strength. And as the Secretary has said, the threats we face are serious. Our investments to counter them must also be, and that's what this budget is intended to do. And I firmly believe that the strength and lethality of our military is built both on the weapon systems that defend us and on the readiness of our service members and their families to accomplish this mission. And make no mistake, our installations are weapon systems, just like our ships, tanks, and planes. We must ensure that they are postured to carry out the entire spectrum of military operations. At the same time, we know that America is a target. Our installations are under threat, not just from our adversaries, but from aging infrastructure, extreme weather, and increasingly complex operational demands. Our budget request includes $17.9 billion in military construction funds, $27.3 billion in FSRM, and $3.8 billion in installation operational energy investments, and addresses these challenges by focusing squarely on military readiness and operational capability. This ensures our resources directly support what matters most, maintaining ready forces and resilient installations that can operate effectively under any condition. In particular, we're focusing on energy dominance, infrastructure modernization, operational energy security, and investing in our innovation and research programs in support of the warfighter. At the same time, we recognize the resilience of our installations is enhanced by partnering with our defense communities, and we're making a concerted effort to work with them on mutually beneficial initiatives that enhance redundancies and prevent risks to national security. We also recognize that our service members' readiness starts at home. We want to ensure our warfighters are able to deliver 100% of their effort to their missions without having to worry about issues with their housing or about the health and safety of their family members back home. So our $1.9 billion in family housing and $1.2 billion unaccompanied housing request supports our commitment to ensuring that the DoD's housing portfolio provides a positive living experience for military personnel and their families. And we also continue to address risks to human health and environment through our environmental cleanup programs funded at $1.5 billion. We're moving in the right direction, but I recognize we must do better on behalf of our service members and their families. To accomplish these goals, the department must ensure that we make the most efficient use of our resources and manpower to enable us to focus on our core mission of defending the nation. EI&E is coordinating several efforts to review current processes and regulations to create efficiencies and reduce costs, including a review of our MILCON and FSRM investment portfolios, real property efficiencies, and a review of our implementation of environmental laws and regulations. Finally, as part of this administration's effort to counter China's malign actions in the Indo-Pacific, we continue to work with key stakeholders to address DoD's use of lands and natural resources in Hawaii through the Hawaii Coordination Cell. We're also undertaking a holistic master planning effort to effectively sequence development, prioritize infrastructure needs, and align support functions with mission growth on Guam. And we'll look forward to working with Congress to address issues such as further extension of the H-2B visa authorities. Going forward, we have some big issues to tackle, such as meeting Congress's directive to significantly increase our FSRM investment to at least 4% of plant replacement value. And I look forward to working with this committee to address these challenges head-on and fulfill our commitment to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Marks. I appreciate you touching on the 4% issue and a master plan for Guam. That's all important. Dr. Waxman, we want to hear from you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Sullivan, Ranking Member Hirono, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to provide an update on the Army's energy installation and environmental programs. Our installations are no longer sanctuaries away from the fight. To ensure mission success, our installations must be modern, resilient, and hardened to support any and every mission, whether they are at home or abroad. Achieving these requirements necessitates a sustained and focused effort. Our investments in installations must facilitate warfighter training, lethality, and readiness. The critical services that enable installations to function must be secure and reliable. Lastly, our installations must be as efficient and effective as possible. To facilitate the modernization and transformation of our installations, this year's budget requests $8.7 billion for facility sustainment, restoration, and modernization, and another $3.1 billion requested for new planning and construction. Beyond the funding requested in the President's budget, our privatized housing partners plan to invest more than $2 billion in our homes over the next few years. Part of enabling our readiness and lethality is ensuring quality housing for both unaccompanied soldiers and their families. The Army recognizes that its deferred maintenance backlog has grown over many years and has caused unintended consequences with both housing and operational facilities. While the Army continues to prioritize funding toward our permanent party unaccompanied housing, we are balancing investments in our mission-oriented facilities. For privatized family housing portfolio, we have made many improvements to the Army's oversight of our housing providers. This includes new quality control mechanisms and third-party inspections of our homes, allowing our installations leaders to verify the quality and status of the work completed. To project power and provide resiliency, our installations and associated services need to be able to rapidly recover from a disruption, whether natural or man-made. The Army continues to explore a variety of technologies that provide more reliable energy to our installations and soldiers, to include nuclear energy. To help improve the resiliency of our energy systems beyond the generation source, the Army continues to conduct Black Start exercises, which provide us with vital information about the interconnection of critical assets on our installations and increase our resiliency. We thank Congress for your continued support of our energy resilience programs. Our installations must also provide realistic world-class training environments to maximize our warfighters' lethality. To that end, our environmental programs are critical to meeting statutory requirements for preservation of training lands and to ensure that the water on our installations is safe for consumption. One of our most critical training ranges is the Pahalkaloa training area in Hawaii, which allows combat training geared toward the Indo-Pacific. The Army continues to work with the state government and local Hawaiians to ensure that these training lands can continue to support this vital training while also addressing the concerns of the local community. The Army is also improving our business practices by working with private partners to find ways to deliver higher quality and more economical support to installations. As an example, our use of energy-saving performance contracts and intergovernmental support agreements save us millions of dollars each year and help us to develop and improve partnerships with our local defense communities. In closing, the Army continues to strive to make many of these critical investments designed to deliver the highest quality, most efficient, and safest Army installations possible to support lethality, readiness, and warfighting. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Waxman. Is it Waxman?
Waxman, that's correct.
Okay. Next, Ms. Johnson-Turner.
Good afternoon, Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Hirono, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today on the Department of Navy's Energy Installations and Environment Portfolio. Our Marines, sailors, and dedicated civilians serve with urgency to defend, project peace through strength, and when needed, defeat our enemies. This portfolio provides direct support to the warfighters and their families and is foundational to all that we do. We appreciate your support for the resources required to train like we fight and win decisively. Warfighting excellence starts on our installations, our power projection platforms. The resilience of our installations is paramount, and I remain deeply committed to ensure that we provide the infrastructure to support our sailors, Marines, civilians, and all of our critical missions. Unfortunately, much of our aging infrastructure is not in good condition. As an institution, we have allowed these assets to degrade over time. The average age of our infrastructure is over 50 years old and beyond its useful life. However, we have expanded the planning horizons to ensure that the important investments we make at our installations have the greatest impact. In a similar fashion, the Navy continues to make significant investments in the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program to improve submarine aircraft carrier nuclear maintenance at the Navy's 4 public shipyards. With 40 projects completed to date, we are already seeing the return on investment with increased nuclear maintenance throughput so that our aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines can get back in the fight on time. In the housing portfolio, we know our Marines and sailors are better fighters if they know that their families are living in safe, quality housing. Our housing portfolio must meet appropriate life, health, and safety requirements to provide a positive living experience for our service members and their families. For our barracks, the Marine Corps remains committed to the Barracks 2030 plan. Over the past 24 months, the Marines have initiated repairs and renovations at 23 barracks. In the past 3 years, the Navy has renovated 14 barracks that improves the quality of life for our sailors. With the planned expansion of the public-private venture projects for both the Hampton Roads and San Diego regions, we will provide an additional 11,000 beds. The results are very clear. Expanding PPV across the unaccompanied housing portfolio increases quality of life. We continue to be thankful to Congress for the authorities provided to get after our infrastructure challenges. We are reviewing our critical infrastructure to fully address the gaps in modernization and recapitalization and addressing the challenges and threats to infrastructure. Our work inside the fence line is important to serving as good defense community partners outside the fence line. We will continue to partner with communities and utility providers to decrease vulnerabilities. The Department of the Navy is also examining military construction improvements and alternative construction material to deliver resources to the warfighter faster. In addition, the department continues to make progress on completing environmental cleanups and remains focused on chemicals of emerging concern like PFAS. All in all, these tangible improvements are necessary to ensure the long-term strength and readiness of our force, but we have more work to do. We appreciate Congress's continued support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Turner. Mr. Saunders, you're next.
Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Hirono, and distinguished members of the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee on Readiness and Management Support, on behalf of the Department of the Air Force and the nearly 645,000 active and reserve component airmen and guardians, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I welcome the occasion to discuss the Department's FY26 budget request for our energy installations and environment programs. Our partnership with this subcommittee has been foundational to ensuring that we maximize the lethality and warfighting capability of our 177 DAF installations across the globe. One of our top priorities for the DAF is the quality of life of our airmen, guardians, and their families. Therefore, we focus our investment and innovation on our housing, dormitories, and child development centers. To this end, we have initiated our first ever commercial on-base apartment complex at Edwards Air Force Base and are seeking to privatize our CONUS lodging in order to modernize and ensure robust sustainment. We're also implementing Wi-Fi for service members in our unaccompanied housing. In addition to quality of life, The health and safety of our service members, their families, and the surrounding communities remain among our highest priorities. As such, the DAF remains committed to fulfilling our PFAS-related cleanup responsibilities in accordance with the federal law, implementing the new PFAS drinking water standard, and promoting transparent collaboration and engagement with surrounding communities. Today, the DAF is undeniably focused on ensuring our installations are ready to support air and space operations in an era where China is expanding, modernizing, and diversifying its entire military. As power projection platforms, the readiness of the Department of the Air Force's installations is critical to our national security. The DAF's Installation Infrastructure Action Plan, or I2AP, is the guiding revitalization of our installations to ensure the Air Force and Space Force can deliver combat power with the necessary speed, range, and intensity to deter adversaries. The I2AP sets clear objectives, goals, and key actions to align installations with critical mission capabilities, optimize vital infrastructure, and maximize mission assurance. We appreciate the subcommittee's support for improving our infrastructure with the NDAA budget provision on FSRM. This will greatly improve our facility conditions. However, we will struggle to meet this budget requirement in full without first optimizing our inventory. Sustaining the associated excess infrastructure forces us to invest critical dollars in areas that do not directly contribute to warfighting and contributes to significant backlogs in maintenance and repair. Therefore, we're increasing demolition and freeing up scarce resources by pursuing several innovative approaches, such as expanding the use of enhanced use leases, strategic real estate opportunities, and developing city-based opportunities. To that end, this week my team is in Massachusetts working with the state, local, and installation leaders to explore opportunities at Hanscom Air Force Base. To achieve peace through strength, we must also ensure our installations can remain resilient through disruptions. Reducing our reliance on vulnerable energy sources and rapidly fielding emerging technologies is essential to defending the homeland and strengthening deterrence. The DAF continues to pursue microgrids and utilize third-party financing and innovative partnerships to modernize and improve resiliency. We're also steadfast in our pursuit of commercial microreactor technology to include a recent announcement of a notice of intent to award a power purchase agreement at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. In closing, the DAF is committed to ensuring our installations provide the nation with the warfighting capability it needs to deter our adversaries and to providing high quality of life for our airmen, guardians, and their families to ensure we maintain a lethal and combat credible force. Thank you for your continued support of our airmen and guardians, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders, Mr. Saunders. I'll begin the questioning here. And I highlighted this, and I'd like to start with you, Secretary Marks, and maybe talk to or mention this to each of the other witnesses. The current projected MILCON in Guam, and I'm not saying Guam is not strategically important, it is, but they go up from $4.7 billion in current projects to over $46 billion in planned future projects. Secretary of the Navy mentioned to me after his visit, he thought the number was north of $50 billion. And I have raised this as an issue where I just think the strategic imagination of our leadership has been lacking, whereby with our Indo-PACOM commanders, the current one I have a deep respect for, the previous one, Admiral Aquilino, I also had deep respect for, but there's a sense that everything is defaulting to Guam, every service. And it creates, in my view, strategic vulnerabilities, particularly if there's a war with China. With all of our forces on one relatively small island, this, I think, creates huge vulnerabilities. So, Secretary Marks, can you touch on that? You say you have a holistic Guam master plan that you guys are looking at. I'm assuming it's going to start to look at a more dispersed force in Indo-PACOM and not come to this issue of a default to Guam literally on everything. $50 billion in MILCON when half the Marine Corps and the Navy are already out there seems to me not very smart.
Senator, thank you for that. And I know you're a deep student of history. You and I have spoken of that before, so I completely understand the perspective as you go there. As I referred to, that was part of when we began this understanding as I came in to look at a holistic picture of where we're putting things. This affects not only the Indo-Pacific, but here in the homeland as well, as we look at our real estate, as our holdings, as well as the cost of everything that we are doing. And part of that is working with our combatant commanders that you mentioned, not only Admiral Paparo, but also General Guillo, in terms of what is the correct force laydown, where do those things need to be, and then balancing that with the cost that we need to get there. And so we've just, at least from my seat, begun to take a harder look at that. I understand your concerns of that. And Senator, I would love to come back to you and discuss that further as I can get a little bit more insight into it.
Good. I'm glad you're undertaking that initiative. I appreciate that. I commend you for that. Do you have a timeline by which you want to get that study done? You know, sometimes, as you know, in big bureaucracies, DOD being one, when they want something to go away, they say, hey, we're going to study it, and we'll get back to you senators in 3 years. How about giving a little timeline on that?
Yes, Senator, I've not yet set one to my team. They're trying to give me a better understanding. I will tell you, though, that both visits to Alaska, to Indo-PACOM, and to NORTHCOM are all being planned right now for me because I want to sit down with each one of them. I think we're planning a visit with your staff in August to go out to Alaska. So
Great.
that is really the timeline I'm on, is I need to be able to sit down with each of them, have this conversation, and continue to drive that planning ahead. So I will come back to you with that when we work our plannings.
Let me ask, because we have other equities in terms, I appreciate that answer. In terms of services, Mr. Saunders, obviously the Air Force is very heavily invested in Guam. Again, I worry about a couple well-placed missiles in Anderson Airfield is gone, right? Ms. Johnson-Turner, you know, the Marines are, I'm not sure how public it is, but kind of resisting having 8,000 Marines on Guam, no place to train. The housing is enormously expensive to build just to get a couple Marine barracks up. Do you have, either of you have any concerns about the Air Force or the Marine Corps and Navy being over-concentrated in Guam with so many forces and so much MILCON in one place in the Indo-Pacific?
Senator Sullivan, thank you for the question. As you noted, Guam is a special and strategic location and one that's vital to the National Defense Strategy. As Mr. Marks noted, we are staying very connected with the combatant commander on all things holistically as it relates to force flow, force posture, and appropriate operational laydown and operational diversity. So, sir, we will continue to strike the right balance with our Indo-Pacific presence, again, being very nested closely with the combatant commanders.
Ms. Saunders?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Similarly, our MILCON program and our investments in general are heavily influenced by combatant commander requirements. And so we recognize the strategic importance of Guam, but all of the requirements within the Indo-PACOM AOR. And we, as I mentioned, focus those priorities from the combatant commanders and our component commander, in our case, the PACAF commander, into areas like Guam and other areas in the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you, and I appreciate Secretary Mark's reference to history. When you look at our own history, particularly in Indo-PACOM, when we've concentrated forces, over-concentrated forces, it's not always turned out so well for our country, our readiness, our lethality, which I know you're all focused on. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that, Secretary Marks, I know you are fully aware of the importance of the training areas in Hawaii, particularly Pohakuloa, and Dr. Waxman, you just noted how important that training area is to our military in the Indo-Pacific. So I would want both of you to commit to continuing the kind of good faith negotiations that we are engaged in to ensure that especially Pohakuloa remains as a necessary training area for our troops in Hawaii.
Senator, not only my commitment, but I had a call just last evening with my Hawaii coordination cell as we continue to move all of the issues forward. So, yes, ma'am.
Yes, Senator, I echo his comments. We have a cell as well in Hawaii working these issues. As you know, we can't formally negotiate until the records of decision are published, which the Army is currently planning to do in August. But we absolutely will commit to engaging with the local Hawaiian population and local government and other local interest groups to make sure that they're all being heard.
As we know, there are some challenges to these negotiations, not to mention the fact that one of the state agencies did not okay the EIS. So the good thing is I believe that the governor is very interested in moving forward, working in good faith with all of you. So recent reporting revealed that $1 billion, as I mentioned, the Facility Sustainment, Restoration, and Modernization Funds will be moved from repairing and maintaining facilities. And as I noted, there are something like in the order of over $200 billion in deferred maintenance needs. So, this is money that's supposed to go for barracks and barracks repair, but instead they're being diverted to activities on the southwest border. Secretary Marks and Dr. Waxman, can you explain how you plan to ensure the soldiers are living in safe and adequate barracks in light of this decrease in funding to the tune of about $1 billion and possibly more? And have you determined how this will impact the Army's maintenance backlog?
So, Senator, thank you for that. We of course, all remain very committed to that and to the health and well-being of all of our service members. But what most of that money was originally things that had not fully executed, and we are restoring that into the 26. But I'll defer to Dr. Waxman in terms of the exact nature in which that was done.
Yeah, so as Secretary Marks said, we did not pull any funding from any projects that were already being spent on. It was money that had not already been assigned. You are correct that we have a very bad backlog of maintenance that we have to fix. And so what we're trying to do is to try to buy that back as best as we can in FY26. The FY26 FSRM budget for the Army is going to be 25% higher than it was even in FY24. And so my instructions to the team has been to not forget any of these actions that we were going to do and to make sure that everything is getting funded that needed to get funded.
So the fact of the matter is that the DOD has decided that it is going to assist Homeland Security in various immigration enforcement programs. This is being done without reimbursement, and the DOD can ill afford for any of these monies that should go to things like barracks restoration and repair, can ill afford any of this kind of diversion. So we will be watching to see how you're going to make up the difference. And in fact, Dr. Waxman, over 3 weeks ago, this committee asked the Army for a comparison of what facility sustainment, restoration, and modernization projects were planned for fiscal year 25 compared to what has been executed to date. And we have not received this information. And when can we expect this information from you?
Senator, that's a fair question. We have just really finalized all those numbers internally. We're getting ready to pull that together, and I make a commitment to you that we will get that to you as soon as we have it finalized and ready for release. Okay,
we're going to hold you to that timeline soon. Ms. Johnson-Turner, you noted that some 14 Navy barracks have been renovated. That's good news. I visited Arizona Hall, a Navy enlisted barracks at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. The facility is dated, lacks central air conditioning. In fact, I note that the Air Force doesn't even let its unaccompanied airmen in places that are not air conditioned, but yet the Navy has this facility that is not air conditioned. And that is not some kind of a luxury, because it's pretty tough to be in a place that's not air conditioned. So I found out that the restoration cost for these barracks is $10 million. That seems eminently doable. So I'd like to know from you, what is the plan, and when can I expect the renovation of Arizona Hall to begin?
Senator Hirono, appreciate the question. As noted, unaccompanied housing remains a priority for the Department of the Navy, and appreciate your attention to and support for the Department of the Navy. Specific to Arizona Hall, We did have sailors that were moved out of that facility about a year ago. Thanks to we are moving forward with a structural assessment, although the building is wholly vacant, which we expect to receive those results this summer.
So is there $10 million being requested to complete the renovation of Arizona Hall?
Senator, I will have to get back to you on the specific amount. I think part of it was now that the facility is vacated and there is no sailors or other service members residing, was to get the structural assessment and determine next steps.
You may not have the specific amount, but can you tell me if this is happening in this budget?
I will look forward to getting back to you,
Okay.
Senator, in
Well-
short order.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. As you know, FSRM funds are used by the service in order to maintain, repair, and improve existing military facilities. And this committee has been leading the way on reforms when it comes to the sustainment of our infrastructure. In responding to a committee request for information, I understand that the services, as well as the Office of the Secretary of Defense, would be in favor of changing FSRM from a one-year authorization to a three-year authorization. First, can each of you tell me if you support this idea? Mr. Secretary?
Senator, thank you. And as I think you and I have spoken before, anything that increases flexibility and allows us to program appropriately, but also allows us to reduce the overall cost as we can get after it, certainly we would support, and I would want to work with you to see how that would become implemented.
Great. Dr. Waxman?
Yeah, I echo Secretary Marks. Any additional flexibility is always welcome. You're right about this challenge. It's like a credit card debt where you save a little bit of money now and you have to pay way more later. And we understand this is a big hole that we have to dig out of, and we're looking forward to working with you on trying to solve that problem.
Great. Ma'am?
Senator, absolutely concur with Secretary Marks. Anything that enhances flexibility and our buying power would be much appreciated. It would get us beyond the year of fiscal year end crunch, as well as give us more time to better plan.
Mr. Saunders?
Senator, I appreciate the question. I echo all the comments previously. It would add additional flexibility and make us more efficient in executing the program.
Okay, that is great. So if you're in support of this, why hasn't Congress seen a legislative proposal on this topic or seen any kind of change in your annual budget request? Who wants that one?
Senator, we'll take that.
Okay,
and,
great.
and work that as we move forward. Certainly, I think that is something we need to sit down and work language with you on to ensure it's in the proper place. But I was made aware of that just this week, so I will absolutely want to work with you on that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saunders, as you know, in March of 2019, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska experienced a massive flood, forcing displacement of 3,200 people and causing millions of dollars in damage. 6 years later, that rebuilding is still in progress, but I would like to highlight that in a testament to the resiliency and fortitude, the airmen of Offutt Air Force Base have maintained full mission capability throughout this entire time. However, these same airmen are having to execute their missions out of aging facilities that are not suited to the task. Could you please provide an update on the Offutt Air Force Base rebuilding effort? And I would ask then that you follow up with that and make sure things stay on track. The facilities are out of date, dangerous, not healthy, and we want to be able to provide for our people.
Senator Fisher, thank you for that question. We share your same interest in ensuring that we restore the facilities to, operational condition, and that we provide high-quality facilities for our airmen that are working at a critical location at Offutt. In this case, throughout the FY19 through 24 program, we've invested about $988 million in that national disaster recovery effort so far. It's 11 separate projects that are awarded, and as you noted, some of them are still in construction, and I remain committed, as you've asked, to keep a pulse on that to ensure that we continue to execute that program.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, what steps are we taking across our installations to ensure that that critical infrastructure and the industrial control systems are protected. At a lot of these installations, you know that we have to make sure that they're protected, that they're hardened, just as much as we worry about the technology.
Senator, I really appreciate that question because that is critical to everything that we do. And we have such a dependency on our community partners in that, right? Our unified or our utility providers and how we operate with that. In fact, I am meeting with several of them tomorrow to discuss how we collectively can get after this problem and certainly focus our investments on ways that make us not only resilient from just an energy dominance, energy security and redundancy position, but also, as you mentioned, the cybersecurity that goes along with that. And I certainly think from an efficiency perspective, our ability to digitally monitor the work that we do is also important to our future efforts, and we'll be prioritizing that as we move
You
it.
know, as we're looking at the coordination, not just with industry partners, but across the services as well, do you have any thoughts on how we can improve on that?
Well, I think certainly, as Dr. Waxman, all the services do, our Black Start exercises are beginning to reveal to us some of those abilities of places where those redundancies lack. That's allowing us to then focus our efforts on, first and foremost, ensuring that we don't have failures, such as at Offutt, which obviously has a critical national security mission that we want to ensure that is there, right? So as we do those, that allows us to then begin to move out, given the resources that we have, to focus on that. But we can certainly come back and try to work with you on that.
Okay, great. I'd be really interested in hearing how, not just how we coordinate, but how we can, and once again, make it move faster.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I want to ask about UASs. We certainly are seeing in real time the threat they pose in combat and the new iterations of them on the battlefield, but they also affect security of DoD installations. We've had incursions at Langley. There have been other bases in the country that have seen these. Talk a little bit about what each of the service branches are doing. You know, the Army is playing kind of a facilitator role, Northcom's playing a key role, but what are you doing with respect to installations, both at home and our installations abroad, to be more really kind of on the leading edge of best practices for UAS incursions?
Senator, I appreciate that question very much, especially given my last role in which that was a singular focus that I was working there in Florida. I would say writ large, and I will allow my partners here to also add, one of the critical pieces of this that I believe we're focused on is not only inside the fence line, but also outside the fence line. So if I wait until that threat is at the fence line, it's much too late. We saw what happened in Spiderweb. We can see the real threat that can happen. And so one of the initiatives that we are moving forward and without our installations is to work on the community ability to integrate these, working on the jurisdictions and the authorities that go with that. I will defer again to my partners here in terms of technologies that we're applying to those solutions, but that's one of the key efforts that my office is going to focus on.
Please.
Thanks, Senator. It's a great question. As you know, counter UAS is a big part of what the Army is doing now, and you know it's a financial question, right? Can we shoot down stuff cheaper than what they're shooting at us? But I think there's two important parts to it that the Army is focusing on in addition to just the technology. One is the energy piece. If you're going to have all these radar systems, microwave systems, et cetera, how do you ensure that you have reliable energy for that? But also it's a policy piece. There are policy and legal challenges with doing counter UAS, particularly domestically. The FAA tends to frown on us shooting things down out of the sky. And so working that problem, I think, is something that we're going to want to work with you and the rest of Congress on going forward.
Senator Kane, thank you for the question, as it does have the attention of the Department of the Navy. We are looking at the systems that we have in place at many of our critical and mission critical installations, as well as the research and development. As we know, technology is constantly increasing. I just led a critical infrastructure forum within the Department of the Navy, where we are looking holistically across Marine Corps and Navy equities to get a whole of done, if you will, approach to get after this. We're also looking at the authorities that we have in place and where we may have potential gaps. And then you've heard the Marine Corps talk about sort of their 3D printing that they've been able to do at Quantico to really continue to push focus and attention to moving forward with drones.
Mr. Saunders.
Yes, sir. No, thank you for the question. I'd start by reiterating for the Department of the Air Force as well as the other services that our installations are power projection platforms, and they operate in an increasingly contested environment, including a contested environment in the homeland, as you noted with incursions at Langley and other locations. So the department is obviously heavily invested in working and partnering with the Joint Counter Small UAS Office, the sister services, and looking at all options, both kinetic and non-kinetic solutions, and ensuring that we develop solutions that are nested in a broader air-based defense and air-based air and ballistic missile defense framework. And that's headed through our Air Force side, on the Air Force side through the A3, but it includes stakeholders across the Department of the Air Force.
You know, if I could just say to my Senate colleagues here, the Langley incursions were maybe 18 or 19 months ago. And we've been together in sort of the skiff where we've tried to get information about, do we know the origin? No, even though it was 19 nights in a row. It wasn't just like one night. We still haven't really been given very good information about it. And maybe it's hard to come upon that information now. But the same issues when we asked 19 months ago, well, the FAA doesn't like us shooting stuff down, you know, outside of base. Of course they don't. Local government, I got this mayor, you know, of Hampton. Okay, he doesn't want that. But those answers 19 months ago, I got them, but it's been 19 months. And I'm still worried that everyone recognizes as a challenge, but I'm not really sure we've got the protocols that we should have by now. And I'm going to add to it, I was at one of our major defense contractors in Virginia. I don't need to name them, but they said they have drone incursions around their perimeter a lot. People trying to see what's going on. What do? We call the service branch that we're contracting with, and we let them know, and they say, thanks, we're glad you let us know. But there's not that much done beyond a phone call and, okay, thanks for letting us know. So I am nervous about this, that there are a lot of stakeholders. It's FAA, it's local government, it's federal law enforcement trying to do the investigation to determine who's responsible. You have to separate the innocent hobbyist from the potential, you know, bad malefactor or foreign actor who's coming after you. But I just worry that we're not yet coming up with the protocols we need, and that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about as we're doing the markup in the NDAA. One other question I wanted to ask about housing. There's a GAO report, 2023, poor living conditions undermine quality of life and readiness, and that is now about 2 years old, highlighted a number of poor living conditions that we're familiar with. But the report made 31 recommendations, and I wonder what's our status in terms of, you know, implementing, or how many have been implemented, how many are in implementation? Can you talk a little bit about that, Secretary Marks?
Yes, absolutely, Senator. Thank you for that. And over half of those have already been implemented. There's another 3 that we're attempting to close out right now. Those are going through the process, but I expect those to be moved shortly. And then each of our partners has a game plan in which we meet regularly to get those to closure. So I think we're on a good pace to get those there through our housing offices.
If I did that question for the record, I think it might be helpful for not just this subcommittee, but all committee members to kind of get, okay, the 31, these have been done, here are the 3 that we think we're closing in on, here are the ones we're still working on. So I'll probably ask that question for the record, because I think everybody's probably going to be interested in that answer.
Understood. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Great, and Senator Kane, yesterday a number of us introduced the Golden Dome Act, which is all about missile defense, which has a significant UAS component, and it's got a UAS component that deals with FAA, DOD, and the services to try to get to exactly what you are talking about. I think it's a really important issue, and I think our services also have concerns that nobody has the authority to actually shoot down a drone if it were doing nefarious activity right now. So I agree with you. I think it's something we're going to certainly want to take up in the NDAA markup. Great, thank you. Well, we're going to go to second round of questions here, and I'll begin with you, Secretary Marks. One of the issues, you're probably seeing it, I'm sure all our witnesses have seen it. In terms of MILCON, one of the challenges we have is the oversaturation of burdensome regulations, many of which come from NEPA, where it takes years and years and even beyond a decade to get through NEPA reforms or NEPA reviews then the inevitable litigation that comes with them, to do anything on basis. So, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you saw the very important Supreme Court case ruling on the Eagle County case, where the court found that agencies will get significant deference on NEPA reviews, and importantly, clarifies that agencies don't have to do reviews and shouldn't do reviews for impacts outside the project's immediate jurisdiction. So have you started to incorporate that into your DoD NEPA analysis? And importantly, like for example on Guam, I know that the Department of Interior was doing a huge NEPA review on some of the base housing related to Guam, incorporating that with the other agencies that might be doing NEPA analysis on military bases to more quickly streamline MILCON projects, which often can take a decade or more because of NEPA red tape.
Senator, absolutely. And in fact, since I've been in the seat, that's been a high priority to try to get after that, working with our partners in ways in which we can accelerate that while still acknowledging our legal and policy responsibilities, of course. One of those, of course, is the team has looked at opportunities there. Where can we use KTEX? Where can we use other abilities to move that forward, shrink those timelines, again, while still meeting those. I'll defer to my partners if they have recent examples, but we hope to bring that forward very soon. And I agree with you. I've experienced that personally, where the standard answer to any environmental answer is, well, it'll be 2 years from now before I come back to you with an answer. That to me is an unacceptable answer.
Yeah, not acceptable. It's a dangerous world out there, and we can't.
It is, absolutely,
We
Senator.
wouldn't be saying that, during World War II or any other times. We need to up the tempo. Let me turn to the very important issue. A number of you have talked about the issue of energy. And one element, and you don't want to repeat rumors, but one of the things that I've heard rumors on, again, in the Indo-Pacific region is the lack of energy storage as a detriment to prosecuting warfighting plans in the Indo-Pacific, particularly even exacerbated more because of the closure at the Red Hill fuel facility in Hawaii. So is that something that you're hearing about from the combatant commanders? In one of the areas that you and I talked about during your confirmation process, Secretary Marks, was the former base at ADAC, which in addition to having 2 8,000-foot runways, a sub-base, has one of the largest and still operational fuel depots in the world. 22 million gallons of fuel can be stored there. But what are our challenges with regard to fuel, a war-fighting capability that we need in Indo-PACOM, particularly given the Red Hill fuel facility shutdown? And I believe ADAC offers a really important element for Indo-PACOM fuel logistics. A lot of people don't know, if you look at a map, ADAC is over 1,000 miles west of Hawaii, and it's in the AOR, very far out in the AOR.
Senator, I appreciate that. And I've been tracking both Admiral Paparo's and General Guillau's comments to you about those issues. We are looking at the global force posture. I know my Navy partners made a visit to ADAC to begin to do an assessment on that, and certainly we're looking at that global force posture. Anything that increases distance, slows us down, and our ability to support the warfighter is certainly a concern, and we'll continue to work with combatant commanders and my service partners to see what we need to do as the next steps.
But are you hearing from the combatant commanders that they're worried about fuel supplies in any kind of contingency? And I'm not just saying it's Red Hill. I'm just saying in general it's a big Pacific Ocean out there, and our warfighters need fuel. I'm hearing that.
Senator, and I don't doubt it, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, that I've reached out to the combatant commanders to sit down as quickly as possible, as well as very quickly sitting down with my partners at Defense Logistics Agency to try to get a better grasp on that situation for you. So I'll come back to you, but I will defer to my partners here, my colleagues, if they have greater
Well,
details.
just with regard to ADAC, the Indo-PACOM commander and the NORTHCOM commander testified in the full committee that we need to reopen that base. I got a commitment recently from the Navy, Ms. Johnson-Turner, to come brief me again on this. This was in a call with the SecNav. Nobody's done it. That was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I'm still waiting. I've been waiting a long time, getting impatient on that, but I'd like to get your commitment, to get what was already a commitment, to come brief me on their latest visit, whether it's dealing with fuel, runways, sub-bases. It's a very strategic location. 2 combatant commanders have already said we need to reopen it, and I just haven't gotten anything from the Navy yet. Can I get your commitment to get the Navy at a senior level in my office soon, as they've already committed to me, to brief me on this?
Senator Sullivan, the Arctic is definitely a strategic and important location. I will follow up within internal to the Department of the Navy so we can circle back with you.
Good, thank you. Senator Hirono.
The question about any questions about reopening Red Hill is going to require a lot of thought, because these were massive facilities. It was a
Just
massive
for the record, I
facility.
didn't say anything about reopening Red Hill.
Well, that's what it sounded like.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying
Oh, good.
the Navy needs to use ADAC as a replacement to Red Hill.
Okay,
I know how sensitive Red Hill is.
That's Alaska.
I would not touch Red Hill.
Encroach.
That's your area.
Thank you very much.
Nothing about
I mean,
reopening
I'm
that.
all for, being open-minded about what we need to do to make sure that our readiness posture remains strong. However, Red Hill was a facility that mainly stored aviation fuel. So, the Air Force has something to say about that. And meantime, though, the presence really is not so much the Air Force in Hawaii, but it's the Navy. And the fuel there was not for Navy. Okay, I'm going to ask some really easy questions so that we can move on. In previous NDAAs, we have extended the H-2B visas for military construction related to Guam and the CNMI. Secretary Marks, would you support another extension of H-2B visas for military construction on Guam and the CNMI?
Senator Hirono, I absolutely would look for an extension that would help with costs, with manpower, and continue to move our projects along so they don't incur any additional costs.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. I did mention in my opening that I wanted each of you to discuss very briefly, but specifically, some ideas to improve the military construction process. And I suppose part of it is somehow hastening the NEPA review process. But do you have any specific ideas on what we can do to hasten military construction?
We do, Senator, and we've looked right now at ideas such as accelerated design build, so bringing in the teams
Yes.
earlier, bundling projects so that we can accelerate those, right? One large project moving through quickly, if we can do that. But I would also look at things that I've asked our team to investigate, such as the use of artificial intelligence solutions to move the projects along more quickly. We certainly want to look at industry standards, and so I've asked our team to begin to look at the Unified Facilities Criteria, the UFCs. Basically, in a broad sense, anything that would restrict us from moving forward that is contrary to either industry standards or contrary to law, we need to identify those and try to remove the restrictions that allow us to get things done quickly to the proper standards.
So the things like design build, are you implementing that kind of a process to speed up the building process?
That is absolutely something we want to move forward as quickly as possible.
So if you
I will
have
come back-
specific examples how that is working, please
I will
submit
come back
them.
to you with one. Yes, ma'am.
And is the Secretary speaking for the rest of you? Do the rest of you have other ideas on what we can do to speed up the process?
Yes, I think what you're referring to is the design build process, which has been demonstrated by other agencies to work faster. There's also the progressive design build process, which we'd like to explore. That is not saying that we currently have authority to do, but that's really the best practices in private sector, and we're happy to work with Congress to see if that authority can be extended.
So
Anything to add?
Senator Hirono, concur with Secretary Marks and Dr. Waxman. The other thing that I would say is we have really benefited from the authority that Congress provided to us for the OTA pilot. We've learned a lot of lessons, tried to move out with industrialized construction, if you will, to get us as close as we can to progressive design build, but being able to further leverage OTA authority in military construction would be of great benefit.
Yes, Senator Hirono, I would, you asked if the Assistant Secretary spoke for all the services.
Okay.
I think in this case, there is a joint working group with the services led by the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So yes, that does provide all of the same responses. And I was, the only thing I was going to add was to echo the comment of the OTAs, which is a relatively recent authority, and that does help.
Thank you. I did mention in my opening that I had concerns about our ability, the department's ability to withstand weather events and to protect our infrastructure, and I'm assuming that that you're going to proceed with some of those kinds of considerations. I did want to get to one thing that's come up recently, and that is just this afternoon, it was reported that the Navy and the Air Force will create 2 additional National Defense Areas, NDAs, attached to Joint Base San Antonio in Texas and Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma, Arizona. For Mr. Saunders, Joint Base San Antonio is 150 miles from the border inside a city of 1.5 million people. How do you justify creating a national defense area so far from the border and inside a major city?
Yes, Senator Hirono, thank you for that question. It also provides me the opportunity maybe to provide a little bit more clarity to what we're actually doing. The Air Force is pursuing an NDA, but it's along the Rio Grande from Roma, Texas to the Gulf of America. It's roughly 260 or 270 miles long. It'll encompass the riverbank to the high water mark. The Joint Base San Antonio reference that you mentioned is the administrative organization that will oversee and adopt that real property on the Department of the Air Force real property records.
Secretary Marks, you know that there are concerns about the continuing creation, because this is like number 4 of these creation of these national defense areas, and it enables the military to get around causa comitatus. So restrictions, Mr. Secretary Marks, are there any plans or discussions to establish similar national defense areas in other U.S. cities?
Senator, there's always planning going on in terms of what we need to do to assist with what the President has asked us to do. However, at this time, those 2 are the one that I'm tracking.
So there's already a diversion of 4,000 National Guards people and 700 or so active duty military in L.A., and there is a concern about what they're doing in these cities, and this is all under the control of the President, thanks to a court decision. But there is a question as to what these troops can do in these areas, even if they're called up in L.A., because there is this issue of causa comitatus. So there are these concerns about the diversion of our troops. So as we create these areas, I mean, how many troops are going to be there monitoring or whatever they're going to be doing in these additional NDAs that has to do with border issues?
Senator, our troops are there in a Title X status. That means they're in a federal status. They are there to assist, not violate posse comitatus. And so as we look at those, they are there simply in a temporarily protect our ICE agents and other federal personnel there within the federal confines of the real property that they are on. And so it's not an intent to skirt posse comitatus, simply to exercise the Title X work that they are doing there.
So my question is, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, how many troops will be for the Air Force and for the Navy will be assigned to monitor or patrol these additional NDAs? That's what I want to know.
Senator, I don't have that exactly unless my colleagues have the exact numbers. We'll take
Navy,
that to the
Air
record
Force.
if we may, ma'am, and I'll get back to you.
Do you have a response?
Senator, I do not know the exact number either, so as Secretary Marks noted, we would have to get back to you.
Yeah, similarly, ma'am, we would work with the Combatant Command Northcom in this case, and they would identify the requirements, which would answer the question of the number, and so we'd be able to get back with you after coordinating with them.
I would like that information provided to this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Just one last question, and this is to Secretary Marks. There's an office within the Pentagon, the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, that has been very helpful in Virginia, and I suspect in other states too. You know, as our Hampton Roads, I'll use that as an example. 12, 13 cities and counties on different sides of the water, but all really unified in their support for the many military missions in the area. That office has been really great in terms of working in coordination when the community is trying to figure out what to do on infrastructure, road building, or bridge construction. Obviously, we like to work in tandem, not just with a single base, but with all the military installations where people are going to be driving to and from every day. And that office has proven really valuable. The office has had a budget over the years where they've been able to help fund local, you know, it might be a part of a transportation study. Senator Durbin and I wrote a letter to Secretary Hegseth about this in March, just saying, hey, this is a good office as you're, you know, getting started. You know, pay attention to this. It can really be used to leverage good relationships with local communities. And I would just like, you know, your commitment that you see the value of this office, and anything you can do to enhance its effectiveness will be good for the military mission, and it'll be good outside the gate in terms of the community-based relationships.
Senator, thank you for that question. And first, thank you that you've seen the incredible value of OLDCC. As a former installation person, I use them extensively, and so I was very excited that they are part of the portfolio that I get to lead. And you absolutely have my commitment, Senator, that we'll continue to push that forward. I think I often say I get better than a 3-to-1 return on investment when I use OLDCC money, especially as it works within our communities. So thank you for that, for your support, and you have my commitment.
Thank you, Senator Kane. I want to talk a little bit more on the, you know, Mr. Secretary, I mentioned the dispersal of forces in the Indo-Pacific that just made strategic sense, but there's also a operational need. I have a chart I'm trying to get here, but I've shown it to many of you. I've brought it to many hearings, and it's all the activity we're getting in the North Pacific, in the Arctic, with regard to Russian and Chinese incursions into our airspace, our ADIZ in Alaska, and our EEZ into our waters. In the last 3 years, we've had a whole host of Russian Bear bomber missions and Chinese naval task forces in an unprecedented manner, joint Russian and Chinese strategic bomber task forces and naval task forces. So the need for infrastructure from which to project American power in this part of the world, refuel, intercept these incursions is really, really important. So can I talk to you about that just briefly, Secretary Marks, as you're looking at the laydown? You need dispersion because you don't want to get attacked, but you also need dispersion and force projection capability because this is the homeland, right? This is the northern border, and they are very active up there. And then Mr. Saunders, the Indo-PACOM commander, and particularly the NORTHCOM commander, have talked about the need for additional airspace, logistics, but also runway space on the Aleutian Islands in ADAC, in western Alaska, Galena, Dead Horse, you know, northern part of Alaska, because when these brave airmen and women do their intercept missions, you know, if it's February over the Arctic Ocean and you're flying an F-16 and you lose an engine, you better want to have infrastructure capability for a SAR mission. So I'd like to get your views on that. Hopefully you've listened to what the NORTHCOM commander has said with regard to forward infrastructure basing for aircraft and Navy ships to project American power in a part of the world that's getting very, very busy. We are on the front lines in Alaska with great power competition, and it's a regular occurrence. That's our border. Nothing more important than that.
Senator, I appreciate that, and the level of detail as you have laid out. And in fact, as I mentioned to you in my hearing, as goes Alaska Defense, so goes Homeland Defense.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you there, Senator. The development of the National Defense Strategy that we're working on, we owe that to the Secretary here by August, focuses on Arctic maritime strategy, Arctic strategy. I would also echo General Guillau's comments, which he as well stated, that when you're at those long distances, having the ability to launch SAR, as you mentioned, is of critical importance. And so what I would want to continue to do, Senator, is one, acknowledge you have the threat, I think, assessment exactly correct. And I think from there is working through the processes we do, both the national defense strategy, the protection of that, and how that works to protect U.S. interests up there is of vital importance. We'll continue to focus on that as we move forward, but I'll defer to my colleague.
Great. Mr. Saunders, you probably heard General Guillaume talking about, air station capability at ADAC, right? There's two 8,000-foot runways there right now with fuel, as I mentioned. In Galena, which, as you know, that's Western Alaska, used to be or interior kind of Western Alaska, used to be a Air Base. King Salmon, that's another area, used to be Air Force Air Base. Dead Horse, which is the most northern part of Alaska, where there's a civilian airport there, but the ability to launch SAR rescue missions there is really, really important. I have the chart here. I'll show it real quick. As you're answering, I'll just put it up there. It gives you a sense, right? We're very busy up there. It oftentimes doesn't make the lower 48 news, but I'll tell you, it makes the news in Alaska, and it should, right? When you have Russian and Chinese joint strategic bear bomber task forces with armed MiGs coming into our ADIZ, you put the other one up here too. We need to protect ourselves and protect our airmen. If you looked at any of those installation upgrades, we already have them in all those areas I mentioned, runways, former bases, that we could use for more infrastructure and power projection to address this. And here's just the number. And the green is joint ops, Russian, Chinese operations, either joint strategic bomber task forces or joint naval task forces. And heck, we even got a balloon task force when the Chinese sent their spy balloons over Alaska, which our Air Force did a great job of shooting down. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, Senator Sullivan, thank you for that. What's not lost on me is our interim national defense strategy has us focused on Indo-PACOM, but first defending the homeland, which basically addresses both of these issues as you're talking about the Alaska region and the Arctic.
So this is homeland,
exactly.
Indo-PACOM because it's North Pacific, and Arctic, right? I mean, it's all three. I was meeting with the incoming Supreme Allied Commander he had his confirmation hearing yesterday. You look at Alaska, the other thing that's really important, but also challenging, and Mr. Secretary, that's why you're so important. You have the seams of all these different combatant commands, right? You have NORTHCOM, you have EUCOM, Russia, you have Indo-PACOM, and you have STRATCOM because of all our missile defenses in Alaska. That's 3-4 critical combatant commands right there in that part of the world, and that's why our adversaries are all over it, coming to our territory. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but you want to unpack that comment a little bit more?
No, it's really just reiterating your point that our focus is on the Indo-PACOM and defending the homeland and these other areas. As I mentioned in an earlier discussion, we also prioritize our combatant commander requirements. So as those combatant commanders identify requirements and increase their priority within those requirements, it influences our priorities for both MILCON and FSRM investments, and that would be no different in these areas that you described. The only other piece I would add with respect to the Air Force and in this region especially, our agile combat employment concept allows us to be able to work not only from fixed installations but from other installations, and that would help address a lot of the areas that you're working at. Even if it's having access to Dead Horse, doesn't necessarily mean it's a permanent installation, but it means that we can station aircraft perhaps on the civilian airfield as it is today to be able to provide the support that we need in certain times.
Well, I appreciate you saying the emphasis on the combatant commanders because, again, just to reiterate, the Indo-PACOM commander and the NORTHCOM commander in full committee hearings have said we need to reopen ADAC. Right there, that's 1,000 miles west of Hawaii. That is real strategic terrain. That's the gateway to the Arctic. That is on China and Russia's flank. When I've talked about reopening ADAC, the Chinese Communist Party goes nuts. They hate it, which to me is a good thing, right? And then you have all the different Northcom commander requests, that's Dead Horse, Utqiagvik area, Galena, King Salmon, all out here, but these are critical areas that the Northcom and Indo-Pacific commander have both said that they need. So we'll want to work with you, Mr. Secretary, and your counterparts here on making those a reality. Let me turn to the topic of energy. And Mr. Secretary, you've already talked about the importance of, energy dominance, energy resilience. I think some of the other witnesses have talked about that. As you're aware, because you and I talked about it during your confirmation process, the President himself, the Commander-in-Chief, has really highlighted the Alaska LNG project. And the reason that's so important, you might want to put that Alaska map up again. The reason that is so important for our country, it has huge potential both for energy security for America, reducing the trade deficit. The estimates of this large-scale LNG project are about $10 billion annual trade deficit reduction if we are sending LNG to our allies in Japan and Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, the Philippines, India. But very importantly for your position and all of your positions is energy resilience for our bases. So right now, that pipeline, the natural gas is up here. We're looking at building a big pipeline that would parallel the Alaska oil pipeline, Trans-Alaska Pipeline, in an LNG export facility here on the Kenai Peninsula. So, Mr. Secretary, as you and I have talked about, do you believe a pipeline like that, which will go right past critical bases at Fort Wainwright, at Eielson, at J-Bear, that's a 100-year supply of clean-burning Alaska natural gas, which our bases in Alaska need. Could our bases benefit from that kind of redundant, very, very reliable and resilient supply of energy for our military bases, for both regular use and use during time of war?
Senator, absolutely, and we've been watching with great interest where this goes. Certainly diversity of energy sources is critically important, as we've discussed, and we would continue to be very interested to see as this moves forward how that could be integrated into our facilities.
Great. And then the second component of this is I've already mentioned the President. You may have seen highlighted this project in his State of the Union address. He highlighted this project in a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. He highlighted this project in a recent phone call with the previous president of Korea, the interim president there. This also has the potential to really, really help our allies in Asia secure American LNG and get off Russian LNG, Russian gas, Qatari gas, which we're seeing over the last couple weeks is very strategically vulnerable. Do you see it playing an important role in that regard as well?
Well, certainly, Senator, I think economic security is national security. So our ability to have that, again, that diversity and the sourcing and knowing where that is certainly very important to it. And again, we would love to see this continue to move forward.
Good. Let me just ask one final question. I had a good 2-hour meeting with the Deputy Secretary of Defense just a couple weeks ago, primarily on the Golden Dome, where we're working together with the administration, the Department of Defense. But I've talked to Secretary Hegseth, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and others about this energy project. There's a potential for the Department of Defense to be a purchaser of the gas and can help with regard to the pipeline. Can I just get your commitment, as you and I have talked about during your confirmation process, to work with us on that? Both the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary have said that this is something they want to work with us on, and more importantly, the President has made this a top priority of his administration.
Senator, yes, we absolutely want to work on this with you.
Great. Let me turn to another form of energy. Mr. Saunders, can you give me an update on where we are on the Eielson? You mentioned it in your opening testimony on your Eielson modular nuclear power project and what the potential is for that, not just at Eielson, but maybe throughout interior Alaska as a further potential.
Yes, Senator. Thank you for that question. So we're very proud to have recently announced our notice of intent to award a micronuclear reactor power purchase agreement for Eielson. It'll be a 5 megawatt solution. Working with Okta is the agency that will ultimately be the awardee. That, as I mentioned, had a public announcement, I think it was last week, if not the week before, and we're on target to finalize that agreement in the 2027 timeframe. I'd be remiss, though, if I would, if I didn't acknowledge that that would be the first of an effort that the DAF is looking at. The DAF is committed to micro-reactor technology throughout its portfolio, as well as all kinds of energy sources. As the Assistant Secretary mentioned, we want to diversify and reduce our dependence on particularly contested energy sources. And so this is one step in that direction, and we're proud to have announced that notice of intent to award.
Good, thank you. Let me continue on with you, Mr. Saunders. I have been working for years now to get the 4 KC-135s to Eielson to support our aerial refueling mission. As you know, we have over 100 fifth-generation fighters in Alaska, in addition to an F-16 intercept squadron up there that does a lot of these Russian intercepts. And the tankers are absolutely fundamental to doing this real-world mission on a very regular basis, not to mention all the great training that we conduct at Red Flag at least 3 or 4 times a year. Former Secretary of the Air Force Kendall ordered the act of association on the 4 KC-135s to happen. We've had one of these KC-135s move to Eielson. Our new Secretary of the Air Force has committed to me in public hearing that we're going to continue with doing that. We have this issue of the housing market in Alaska. We want these to be accompanied tours with the 400-plus new airmen that'll be coming with these KC-135s. Do you have an update on what we can be doing collectively with regard to housing in the Eielson, Fairbanks, North Pole, interior Alaska area? There's some questions that the data on the housing is a little stale, some questions that we need more housing, some questions that we might need base housing, but we want to make this happen. We want to make these deployments really great experiences for our airmen, but we also want to get these KC-135s there soon. It's mission critical for the Air Force, for that intercept mission. As you know, as all of you know, any contingency in the Indo-Pacific, everybody's going to be flying over Alaska because of how strategic we are on the Great Circle route. Do you have an update on that, Mr. Saunders?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Let me start by reiterating Secretary Mink's commitment to relocate the 4 KC-135s to Eielson. As you noted, AMC has already transferred 1, and then the additional 3 aircraft will be reassigned from the Pacific Air Forces Command, PACAF, by the end of FY26.
So what's the time? Give me, is that within a year from now?
Roughly a year and a quarter, yes, sir.
Okay, we want to shorten that timeline. I've only been waiting on this for 10 years.
Yes, sir. So that's the right now the current estimate is the end of FY26. You alluded to the housing, and as you know, my office worked with your staff during a recent site activation visit to enable this 4 aircraft plus up.
We appreciated that very much.
And during that time, we acknowledged that the local community is addressing the housing issue and requirement, and we made sure that the data is refreshed. Now that there still is a concurrent travel restriction. However, we do allow families to relocate to Eielson. What the current restriction does is it, in essence, requires the member to either secure housing before they depart, and their family would depart with them at the same time when they arrive in Alaska, or it would wait till they arrive in Alaska and secure the housing before the family relocates to minimize disruptions to the families.
What's the best way to get that concurrent restriction lifted? Because what we want is the airmen to come, accompanied tours, bring their spouse, bring their kids. It helps the community. It makes for a better deployment. 3 years as opposed to 1 year. Do you have
Senator,
any
no,
recommendations for us?
I
We want to
agree.
work with you on this.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. As a former military member and a military dependent, I grew up in a military family. You know, traveling with your family is obviously what we want to do. In this case, the PACAF commander has the travel restriction, and they keep pulse on the requirement. And so I need to defer to the PACAF commander as to when that requirement would change. But they are certainly keeping pulse to ensure that that the housing is there to support the family.
And that restriction is based on what the PACAF commander sees as the limited housing stock?
It sees in the need to find housing and secure housing before the family relocates. Now, I should reiterate, that doesn't mean that we don't allow families to Eielson. They certainly do. It is an accompanied tour, so you know, members do get to bring their family. They just need to show that they have secured housing before the family actually relocates.
Okay, good. Let me ask one final question. You've been great witnesses today. It's very, very informative hearing. I mentioned, and each of you mentioned, but I just want to triple check it, and I was pleased to see that each of you actually mentioned significant funding for kind of the barrack upgrade issues, right? And you might remember a couple of years ago, this became a giant issue that went to the SecDef level, and the Secretary and Chief of the Staffs of the Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, because the enlisted housing, it was revealed, was very substandard and really not worthy of the men and women who sacrificed for their country to, you know, serve in our military. So I just want a quick gut check with each of you on where you think our housing is, particularly for enlisted members of the military. You have put in, each of you, in your budget requests, significant upgrades to that. Is there more you need to get to a level that we want to make sure, hey, if you raise your right hand to join the Marines or the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, you're not going to be living in a dumpy place on base that's got, you know, mice and rats, you know, and mold. We're going to give you a good place to live so you can be ready to serve your country when you're called. Are we feeling good about that, Mr. Secretary? And I'd like to go to each of the service representatives.
Senator, certainly, and I think you're seeing across-the-board investments of over 30% as we continue to commit. Also, what I appreciate, and thank you for your support in terms of the latitude of things like leasing and other options that we can get after. So we're getting after the problem. Certainly, we need to keep the pressure on.
By the way, we want to give you that authority to be creative. It's not always a, you know, cookie-cutter approach in different communities. It can be a creative mix of different things. Living out in town, not everybody lives on base, but we need to make sure they're getting those good housing.
Yes, sir.
Good. Mr. Waxman? Or Dr. Waxman?
No problem. So
I notice you're a PhD nuclear physicist, so, you know, that's impressive. That's why I want to call you doctor.
it's not as complex as barracks, sir. So we have an index that we've been using to look at barracks quality, BCI, and so the scary number is a score of 70. If barracks is below 70, it's considered poor or failing. The most recent time the Army looked at this, 14% of our barracks are below that metric, so it's totally unacceptable. We have a plan in our budget. I know we haven't released the FIDEP, but we have a plan to get everything above 70 before 2030. Good. And then we're working with OSD on a plan to actually, beyond that, get to even scores of 80 for all.
And did you put in a significant budget request, you believe, in this year's budget on this topic? I forgot what yours was, but it sounded like it was in a couple billions of dollars.
Yes, sir. We believe that the budget for FY26 gets us on that glide path to 2030.
Okay, great. Our next witness.
Senator, thank you for the question. Yes, unaccompanied housing remains a priority within the Department of the Navy. Our secretary just, as it relates to the Navy, asked for 100% inspection, and the Marine Corps did this in 2024. We are continuing to stay focused on that. On the Navy side, we are looking at improving overall quality of life with our Forging Communities of Excellence plan. And on the Marine Corps side, we have Barracks 2030 that gets after, you know, putting more focus on renovating and right-sizing the portfolio as far as updating our furnishings on a more frequent basis, as well as civilian managers. So all in all, lots of investment. We are definitely in the Don looking at all of the solutions, whether it's PPV, leasing, or other avenues to get us to get the quality of housing that our sailors and our Marines deserve.
Good. Good answer. Mr. Saunders, you can wrap it up.
Yep. Yeah, the Department of the Air Force also certainly has a high standard for our unaccompanied housing, as well as our members with families in either in off-base housing to provide them support, or in our privatized housing or our military family housing, or government-owned housing, I should say. With respect to the unaccompanied housing, we're investing heavily there. In this current FYDP period, it's about a threefold investment compared to the previous FYDP. And so roughly $1.1 billion invested from the period of 2022 to 2026, which, like I said, is about 3 times higher than the previous 5-year plan. We have a dorm master plan that guides our investments. Similarly, we track building condition index, and we work on the worst case first. We've got investments funded both this year, next fiscal year, and then obviously planned throughout the FYDP. We would just, if there were additional directed funding available to us, we certainly would apply that to our master plan to reduce the timeline in addressing all those requirements.
Great, good. Well, I'm glad to see all the services are focused on this important priority. It's a priority of mine. It's a priority of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Well, with that, I appreciate the witnesses. Excellent job during this hearing. We will, if there's additional questions for the record, we will submit those within the next 4 days, and we respectfully ask you to try to get those returned to this subcommittee within the next 2 weeks. And with that, thanks again. This hearing is adjourned.